Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel for another Disney Dreamlight Valley video. So in today's video we are going to be decorating the pumpkin house that came with Fairy Godmother. I originally had this house set up in the Forgotten Lands, but I decided to move it to the Glade where it just fit the vibe a bit more perfectly. So here we go. So when I decided to move this house, it was because in the Forgotten Lands I decorated it all and it just didn't really fit the vibe. Obviously I wanted to use a lot of pumpkins and farming items and have it just kind of have an orange and red vibe with most of the foliage and the plants, so having it up there kind of didn't really match. As my glade isn't really decorated too much right now, I had quite a lot of space to work with and decide where I wanted to put this house, but I decided to put it in the back left corner just because there was a lot of room there and I knew I would want to do a bigger garden. So when I first went in, I decided to first place all the trellis. Now I knew I wanted to trellis around the edge to give it a farm vibe, so I decided to place a lot of that in, and I did have to play around with where I wanted to put this trellis and if I wanted to have the pond included in the garden or not, but I felt like this worked better having it in this kind of odd shape. It just made it look a lot more natural. So once I'd done this, I kind of repositioned the pathway around the edge just to make sure it fit around the garden, and I started to place some of the bigger items that I knew where they wanted to be, like the lanterns and the table. After that, I went in with some of the leaf strewn path. I went for the non-bordered version just so it looked more natural, and it's kind of hard to see it on the ground in the glade because it is just muddy ground, so it's kind of hard to tell, but when everything is placed you can notice it a bit more and it looks a bit more natural. I then went in with a lot of the rock clusters just to make a makeshift pathway to look really rustic and forest-like. I don't currently yet have the rock rug from Scrooge's store, so maybe if I decide to be given this one day, I will go and replace them all. Once I place these, I place some of the bigger items like the pumpkin vine lamps and some little smaller objects like some pumpkins and tables and chairs just to see where everything wanted to go. I then went to my crafting bench and crafted up some of the items I knew I'd probably need for this build. So some of those were things like sacks and flower baskets and pots and things that could kind of go around the farming area I knew I was going to create, but then also some other items like flower pots and flowers to go around and decorate the pathway. Once I built these, I then went in and decided where I wanted my little farming plot to go. When I was making the garden, I decided this is what I wanted to include, as I feel like Fairy Godmother would have a lot of flowers around, but also a lot of plants, and would be kind of interesting having her own little mini farm. It wasn't the biggest farm, but I wanted it to be about this size just because I felt it fit the vibe for this area, and I started to place some of the smaller items around it to get it ready. I then went in and moved some of the trellis and put the trellis archway in just to know where the path was going to be. I also put a trellis archway over by the rock area just so I can access it when I need to mine. After this, I then went in with some of my larger items, so I popped in some hay bales at the sides of the house just to give it a more farmy vibe, and I also kept moving about with the lantern and table area just because I wanted to figure out how I wanted to place this and how I wanted it to be seen in the garden. I then went in and placed some trees behind the house. I wanted to use obviously the glade trees just because they have this kind of swampy vibe, but they also just overhang everything really nicely. I originally placed one of the larger swamp trees, but it didn't look quite right, so I went with the more mossy trees, and I also included one of the red maples just to fit the red and orange vibe of the pumpkins. I then continued my pathway onto the side of the house, so it goes underneath the table setup as well as out the archway that leads to the rest of my glade, just so it looks like a more uniform area, and again placed a lot of these smaller rock clusters to kind of show where the pathway goes. Once I'd done this, it allowed me to place some smaller items around the pathway, so some of the plant pots with the different flowers in, and then I went in with the bushes and foliage. So when making this, I decided that I was going to use some of the sunlit plateau plants just because the orange and red style of them fits so well in this area, and it just tied everything together really, really beautifully. So I went with the bushes and the ferns for that. After this, I just placed a few more items, so like the pumpkin stack and the stone well, as well as extending the pathway to the trellis arch going to the rock spot, just so you could see it as a more defined area where the rock spot was, because obviously I knew I was going to need to access this all the time, especially as it is in the glade. After this, I went in on the farm, and first I decided to plant wheat seeds and just kind of see how they looked when they grew. Obviously the obvious thing to plant here would be pumpkins, but I thought wheat seeds might look a little bit better, so I tested this out and had a look how it looked. I then went in with some of the final items, so I placed the yellow bike, which is obviously a necessity when building anything cozy like this, and I also placed some things on the tables as well as some of the leaf rugs underneath some of the more sort of grassy areas like the seating area and the farm. Once I'd done this, I saw how the wheat looked when it had grown, and I honestly just wasn't a fan of it. It just didn't look how I wanted it to look, so I harvested them all and had a little look around if there was anything else I wanted to change. I then went into my inventory and placed some of the pumpkins I already had in there. Using the pumpkins that are harvestable is actually a really good way to decorate. It just gives you a lot of variety with how things look, so I placed some of those around before I went in and planted pumpkins in this farming area. So this is the final garden. So as you go in, you can obviously see the stone well, as well as some of the pumpkins and flower pots. I also dotted some candles about in between all of the bushes, just because I love doing this in my builds. It really makes everything look a lot more cozy, and you can just kind of see the lights off in the distance, which just brings it all together. As you move forward, you can obviously see the farm area where I've planted all the pumpkins. Obviously when these are grown, these will look 10 times better. And then on the left you have the lanterns with the table and the little stalls. I did change these to the pumpkin stalls just because they looked 10 times better in that spot. So that is my finished Fairy Godmother pumpkin design. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys do have any recommendations of how I can update and change this, or any items that might look good, I'm always happy to hear them, so do let me know in the comments. And if you guys want to see anything else from me, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!